Welcome again to Evangel, and I'm so glad that you're here this Wednesday evening, and we're on our third in our series of why keep praying when we don't get the answers we want. I know that's a bad question to ask because when we pray, everybody expects to be answered yes. But God does always answer prayer. Usually it's one of four ways. First time is yes, and that is the answer we all want. We all want God to say yes every time we pray. But it's not always that way. Sometimes he says wait. Nobody has the patience to wait these days. We live in this microwave generation. We push the button for start and we stand there counting 5, 4, 3. No, we don't like waiting at all. Imagine if you'd been Abraham. Abraham was told that he was going to have a baby when he was 75. God says, Abraham, I want you to leave where you are, leave your father's family, go to a place I'm going to show you, and I am going to make a great nation out of you. Well, problem is, even though he got a little bit impatient with Ishmael, after all, now he's 87, Isaac didn't come along until he was 125 years waiting for God to answer the prayer. Yeah, we don't like that kind of wait. Well, sometimes, even though we pray and God answers, we may not even recognize his answer. And the reason for that is God's answers are sometimes different than what we expected. We pray for God to bless us, we pray for God to answer, and in our minds we have it all figured out, but God answers in a completely different way. Part of the reason can be found in Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 when he says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not your ways, for even as my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, so are my ways higher than your ways. And we sometimes get a little bit discouraged when we have things figured out in our mind, because we do like to figure things out. We like to know how things are going to be, and if God answers different than we had expected, sometimes we just think he didn't answer at all. But yeah, he really did. But the fourth way, this is the one we do not like. Sometimes God just says no. Now, what do we do when God says no? Well, first of all, we need to pray for wisdom if we think we're hearing God say no. Pray for wisdom to know, am I really hearing you right? Because that's something that we all struggle with. How do we hear God's voice clearly? How do we know what he's really saying? So ask God for wisdom to be able to know if that's really what he's saying. And then not only wisdom to know if that's what he's saying, but wisdom to know what to do next. If I can't do what I had planned to do, then Lord, what do you want me to do? So we just continue praying. Now, we need to be clear about a couple of things. Sometimes when God says no, or we're not sure, that really is his final answer. We don't have another lifeline that we can call in. We can't call for another help. We can't make another. God has said no, and that's the end of the question as far as he's concerned. He did that with Paul. Paul, one of the greatest apostles of all times. Look how much of the New Testament he wrote. Look, he had personal encounters with Jesus, and he spoke to him. But the Bible tells us that Paul had a problem. Now, we don't know what the problem was. It was a thorn in his flesh, and we don't know if that thorn happened to be other people, physical problems, eye problems. We don't know what it was, but Paul certainly knew. And it was something that he lived with day after day after day. And Paul said, 3 times. He didn't say 3 times I asked the Lord. No, he said 3 times I pleaded. That means he begged the Lord. For 3 times he pleaded with the Lord to remove this thorn, that it would leave him. But he said to Paul, God said, my grace is sufficient for you. And my strength, my power is made perfect in your weakness. Paul came to the point he understood, okay, God's answered a lot of prayers, but this is something I've spent enough time praying about. I don't need to keep praying about it because God has said no. And sometimes we just need to take no for a final answer, because that is God's final answer. And no matter how much time we spend pleading and begging and asking him, his answer is always going to be no. We can't change his mind. You know what? There are times that when God says no, and we plead and we beg, that God might change his mind. You know, we see that happening in the Old Testament several times. God told Moses, he says, I'm going to destroy my people. And God said, okay, if they die, you're going to take me too. And so God relented. But we have to realize that sometimes when God says no, it may not be his final answer, but it could very well be his best answer. I want to tell you a story today from the Old Testament about a king by the name of Hezekiah that really puts this in perspective for us. See, Hezekiah was a great king. We read about this story in Isaiah, and we read about it in Kings, and it says that Hezekiah was a godly king. He was a good king. When the Assyrians came against Jerusalem, Hezekiah prayed, and God protected them. He was a man who called the people to prayer. He was a man who built the city of Jerusalem. He is a man who restored the temple. But he was also a man who one day got very sick. The Bible said he was so sick, he was almost at the point of death. Some of you watching, with things that you've gone through in the past, you may have felt you've been at that point too. And so God sent the prophet Isaiah to Hezekiah. And he said, Hezekiah, the Lord is saying, put your house in order, for you're going to die. And he turned and he went out and he was on his way leaving, going back to his house. When he did that, after he left, Hezekiah, who was on his bed, it said he turned his face to the wall and he wept before the Lord and he cried. And I want to read you what he prayed. He said, remember, O Lord, I pray, how I have walked before you in truth and with a loyal heart, and I have done what was good in your sight. And he wept bitterly. God was moved by this prayer. Here was a man who loved the Lord, and he reminded God not just of his love, but how he had been good. And he says, and I've been loyal to you. And so before that prophet Isaiah got out to the middle courtyard, God told Isaiah, he says, go back. I want you to go back and talk to Hezekiah again. And so Isaiah goes back. And he tells Hezekiah, the Lord has seen your tears, heard your prayers, and he is going to heal you. Oh, can't you just see the people rejoicing? Don't you know that Hezekiah was singing and rejoicing? God gave Hezekiah an additional 15 years. And he said, you're going to be healed, and 3 days from now, you're going to be well enough, you can go to church, or I'll go to the temple. And Hezekiah said, oh, that's wonderful. And he started feeling better. He said, but, I'd like to have a sign that I'm going to get to go to church in 3 days. Hezekiah, you can have your choice. There's this big sundial out front. Do you want the sundial to go forward 10 degrees, showing the sun's going down, or do you want it to go back 10 degrees, showing that the sun is going the opposite direction? It's coming back up. Hezekiah said, oh, it's nothing. Sun dial goes down every day. I wanted to see it go back. That miracle was performed, and Jerusalem was saved from the Assyrians. Hezekiah lived 15 more years. He had a son. All of the people around heard about it. Even other countries sent him get-well cards and presents, and everything should be great. This is something that seems like God is getting the glory. Everything is wonderful, and we should be rejoicing still today because of those 15 years, right? Not exactly. Not exactly. You see, basically there are two results from Hezekiah's prayer. First of all, we have Benadad, the king of Babylon, who sent a get-well card, letters and gifts to Hezekiah because he had heard of the miracle. And they come, and Hezekiah, he's just so thankful to see them, and he takes them, and he shows them all of his house, all of his dominions, everything he has. That's good. On the surface, they leave. And you know what happens? Isaiah pays another visit to him. And Isaiah says, Hezekiah, who are those men that came to see you? Oh, they came from a long, long way away. They came from a place called Babylon, I think. Yeah, Babylon. Yeah. Nobody's ever heard of that place. And Hezekiah, what did you show them? Oh, Isaiah, I showed them everything in my palace. I showed them the kingdom. I showed them the temple. There's not a single thing that I did not show those men. Isaiah looked at him and he said, Hezekiah, I want you to hear the voice of the Lord again. The days are coming when this country, this little country named Babylon, that you said no one has ever heard of, well, they are going to come and they're going to take everything out of your house that you've showed them, everything out of your kingdom, everything that you have, and everything that your fathers have accumulated. And they're going to take all of that, plus they're going to take sons. They're going to take your grandkids, and they're going to take them all to Babylon, and they're going to make your grandkids their eunuchs. Oh, wow. That didn't sound like what Hezekiah signed up for when he prayed not to die. Not only that, there was a second thing that happened. Remember, I said when he lived for 15 years, God gave him a son? And he may have given him more than one. We don't know how many kids he had during that 15 years. But even we know that he had one. And we're told that when Hezekiah died, his son Manasseh reigned in his place. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 55 years in Jerusalem. And he did much evil in the sight of the Lord. If Hezekiah had died 15 years earlier, Manasseh never would have been born. And it might be easy to say, oh yeah, but, Manasseh, he needed someone to be his king, so he had to have another son. No, remember King David? King David had lots of sons. But he chose Solomon to be king, even though Solomon was not the oldest. Hezekiah got to choose out of all of his sons who would be king. And Manasseh he became king when he was only 12. But during those 55 years that he reigned, he became so evil that during all the kings following him, God would compare them to the evil of Manasseh. And he said, Israel Judah is being punished for the evil that Manasseh did. When God says no, sometimes it's for our best because he knows exactly what we need. So there's 4 things I'd like for you to remember when God tells you no. Remember his goodness. God says, I love you with an everlasting love, and I can and I will work things out for your good. I have good plans for you, plans to give you a future and not to harm you. So when God says no, realize his heart is for you and not against you. Realize his authority. He is God and we are not. He is the one that knows what we need because he can see our end from our beginning. Remember his promises. His promises says that he will keep you in the hollow of his hands, that he has loved you, and that you're like the apple of his eye. He wants you to know that no good thing will he withhold from you. So many times we pray for things and God says, oh no, that's not the best. He knows what your best is, and that's what his heart is to answer. And then know the purpose. He said, my purpose is to prosper you. My purpose is to give you a hope. My purpose is to give you a future. My purpose is to conform you to the image of my Son. We don't understand all of God's ways. We can't figure them out because we're not God. But I think that the song that the Evangel worship team's going to take us out with today, I Know, I think that will help you understand that even when we don't get the answers we want, God is still good, he's still in control, and he still loves you.
You don't answer all my questions, but you hear me when I speak. You don't keep my heart from breaking, but when it does, you weep with me. And you're so close that I can feel you when I've lost the words to pray. And though my eyes have never seen you, I've seen enough to say, I know that you are good. I know that you are kind. I know that you are so much more than what I leave behind. I know that I am loved. I know that I am safe. 'Cause even in the fire, to live is Christ, to die is gain. I know that you are good. I don't understand the sorrow, but you'll come within the storm. Sometimes this weight is overwhelming, but I don't carry it alone. You're still close when I can't feel you. I don't have to be afraid. And though my eyes have never seen you, I've seen enough to say, I know that you are good. I know that you are kind. I know that you are so much more than what I leave behind. I know that I am loved. I know that I am safe. 'Cause even in the fire, to live is Christ, to die darkest day, from my deepest pain. Through it all, my heart will choose to sing your praise. On my darkest day, from my deepest pain. Through it all, my heart will choose to sing your praise. On my darkest day, from my deepest pain. Through it all, my heart will choose to sing your praise. I know that you are good. I know that you are kind. I know that you are so much more than what I leave behind. I know that I am loved. I know that I am safe. 'Cause even in the fire, to live is Christ, to die is gain. I know that you are good. I know that you are good.